The dark secret humanity was never supposed to know. What if everything we've been taught about human history was never entirely true? What if the story of who we are, where we came from, and what we've become was rewritten long ago, not by scholars, but by silence itself? Every great civilization leaves behind a trace, a ruin, a legend, a question. Yet scattered across the world are clues that refuse to fit our timeline. Monuments older than the civilizations we credit for building them. Technologies centuries ahead of their supposed inventors. Myths that describe events no myth should ever remember. For generations, humanity has gazed backward, convinced it sees its own beginning. But what if what we call the beginning was only the restart? A reboot of a story much older, one that someone or something wanted us to forget. Beneath the deserts, under the oceans, and deep within layers of forgotten earth lie the fingerprints of an age that defies the limits of our imagination. We've unearthed temples that predate agriculture, cities buried under jungle canopies, artifacts made with techniques that shouldn't have existed for millennia. Each discovery pulls one thread from the fabric of history, and with every tug, the tapestry begins to unravel. Scientists call them anomalies, historians call them exceptions. But what if they're neither? What if they're fragments of a lost pattern, a hidden truth buried beneath time itself? For centuries, religions, empires, and institutions have fought to control the narrative of origin. They built doctrines around what must be believed and buried, what could not be explained. The victors wrote the chronicles, but the truth, the real truth, was carved in stone long before any empire existed. And that truth was dangerous. Not because it threatened faith or science, but because it threatened control. Because knowledge, real knowledge, is power. And whoever controls the story of humanity controls humanity itself. Imagine for a moment that buried beneath the dust of forgotten ages lies evidence that civilizations once rose and fell before the dawn of recorded time. Societies capable of engineering that mirrors our own, perhaps even surpasses it. Imagine that they warned us. Imagine that those warnings were erased. This is not fiction. It is a trail of clues, carved in megaliths, whispered in myths, hidden in plain sight. From the frozen ruins beneath Antarctic ice to the star-aligned temples of ancient worlds, a pattern emerges, a shadow history of humanity edited and redacted across millennia. Who buried it? Who decided what we were allowed to know? And what if the truth they tried to bury is resurfacing again? In discoveries, in technology, in the very DNA of our species. Tonight, we trace the fragments. We follow the evidence. We pull the curtain back on the oldest conspiracy of all, the rewriting of human memory. Because somewhere beneath the silence of time, there's a truth so profound, so terrifyingly clear, that once you see it, there's no going back. The forbidden timeline. History tells us that civilization began only 6,000 years ago, a fragile spark of order rising from chaos. But every shovel that pierces the earth, every sonar that scans the ocean floor, and every satellite that maps forgotten lands seems to whisper the same defiance: you are wrong. In 1994, archaeologists uncovered something in southeastern Turkey that rewrote everything. A complex of megalithic temples buried beneath 12,000 years of soil. They called it Göbekli Tepe. It was built thousands of years before the pyramids, before writing, before the wheel, before agriculture itself. It shouldn't exist, and yet it does. Massive stone pillars arranged in concentric circles, carved with animals no one had seen for millennia, aligned precisely with the stars. Whoever built it understood astronomy, architecture, and geometry long before humans were supposed to. But here lies the paradox. If Göbekli Tepe existed 12,000 years ago, then the timeline of civilization isn't wrong by a few centuries. It's wrong by millennia. So what did historians do? They rewrote the narrative again, claiming it was a ceremonial site built by primitive hunter-gatherers who somehow mastered advanced stonecraft overnight. But how does a species leap from nomads with spears to engineers of monolithic temples, then forget it all? The truth is, this isn't an isolated anomaly. It's a recurring pattern, one that stretches across continents and eras. Off the coast of Japan, the Yonaguni Monument lies submerged beneath the Pacific, terraces, steps, and carvings that resemble the ruins of a sunken city. In India, beneath the waters of the Gulf of Cambay, sonar imaging revealed geometric structures spread across 5 square miles, a city carbon-dated to 9,000 years ago. In the Andes, the ancient site of Pumapunku features stones cut with laser-like precision, seams so perfect a blade can't pass between them. Each of these sites defies the same timeline, a timeline we've been told is absolute. But if multiple civilizations around the world were building in ways that modern technology still struggles to replicate, then our question should not be how, but when. Archaeology's greatest secret isn't what it's found, it's what it's ignored. For every discovery that pushes the story backward, countless others are dismissed as hoaxes, misinterpretations, or natural formations. But stone doesn't lie, carvings don't appear by chance, and myths don't echo across continents unless they're remembering something real. In the myths of Sumer, Egypt, and Mesoamerica, the pattern repeats, the tale of a great flood, a destroyed world, and survivors who carried the light of knowledge to rebuild civilization. Maybe they weren't talking about gods, maybe they were talking about ancestors, a civilization erased by catastrophe, whose memory was reduced to myth. What kind of event could wipe out knowledge on a global scale, forcing humanity to start again from zero? Some point to the end of the last ice age, to a cataclysmic shift around 12,000 years ago that flooded coastlines and drowned entire lands. Others suggest it was something far greater, a celestial impact, a cosmic reset written into the scars of our planet. But perhaps the most unsettling possibility is this, that we didn't lose that knowledge by accident, that somewhere someone decided we weren't ready to remember. It would explain why ancient texts speak of forbidden wisdom, of knowledge stolen from the gods and punished by flood and fire. It would explain why the oldest monuments are buried intentionally, as if sealed to protect what lies beneath. And it would explain why, every time humanity begins to uncover these truths, something or someone pushes back. History isn't a straight line. It's a loop, rising, collapsing, and rising again, while fragments of the old world hide beneath the new. But the question that haunts every archaeologist brave enough to look beyond the accepted story is not how far back civilization goes. It's what happened the last time we reached this point, because the deeper we dig into the earth, the closer we come to uncovering the forbidden truth that we are not the first. Echoes of forgotten gods. Long before the first empires rose, before writing etched memory into clay, stories were all we had. And in every corner of the ancient world, separated by oceans and time, those stories echo the same refrain. Beings of light who came from the heavens and taught humanity everything it needed to survive. The Sumerians called them the Anunnaki, the those who came from above. In Egypt, they were the Netjeru, divine architects who raised the land from the waters. Across the Atlantic, the Maya and the Aztecs spoke of Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent who descended from the sky, bringing language, agriculture, and the knowledge of the stars. In the Andes, the Inca revered Viracocha, the white-robed teacher who emerged from the sea after a great flood to restore civilization. Different continents, different cultures, yet the same story, whispered in different tongues. For centuries, scholars dismissed these accounts as myth, the poetic imagination of early man struggling to explain the unknown. But what if those myths were never meant to be symbolic? What if they were memories? If an advanced civilization once existed before the cataclysms of the Ice Age, the survivors would have seemed like gods to the scattered remnants of humanity, bearers of knowledge, tools and wisdom lost in the flood. Their reappearance would be remembered not as history, but as divine intervention. Every myth begins as a truth that survives the fire. And somewhere within those myths, the ashes still glow. Ancient texts describe the same gifts: knowledge of the heavens, the measurement of time, the secrets of agriculture, the geometry of the earth. These are not the discoveries of isolated tribes. They are fingerprints of a shared inheritance. Civilizations separated by thousands of miles somehow aligned their temples to the same stars, built pyramids of identical proportions, and encoded astronomical cycles with mathematical precision. Coincidence? Or the echo of a common teacher? The same forgotten civilization whose timeline was erased. When we strip away the divine names, what remains is the same pattern. A moment in deep time when humanity did not evolve alone, but was guided. By who or what, we cannot say. But we can follow the trail they left behind, not in scripture or superstition, but in stone. The builders of Göbekli Tepe, the engineers of the Nile, the astronomers of Tiahuanaco, they all looked to the same sky. They all mapped the same constellations. They all worshipped light as the source of creation. And maybe, just maybe, that wasn't religion. It was memory. Memory of an age when knowledge was passed down not by writing, but by alignment, by monuments that spoke through geometry. Each structure a message, each symbol a frequency, resonating across centuries, waiting to be decoded. But if that knowledge once existed, where did it go? How could humanity inherit the stars, then forget how to look at them? Why does every culture recall gods who descended to teach and then left? The more we study these myths, the more they resemble data, a code fractured by time. Even their endings are eerily consistent: a great disaster, a flood, a silence. As if the same hand wrote the same tragedy in every language. Perhaps these weren't gods in the divine sense, but guardians of knowledge, protectors of something humanity was never supposed to lose. And when that knowledge became too dangerous, when the balance between creation and destruction was broken, they did what any teacher would do when the student isn't ready. They took it back. Maybe that's why the ancients never described them as immortal, only departed. And maybe that's why we still search the skies for their return, not because they were gods, but because deep down we remember that once we weren't alone. They came before history began. They left before history could record them. And what remains are the echoes, carved in stone, hidden in myth, and waiting to be heard again. The builders before time. There are places on Earth where time feels wrong, where every stone defies explanation and every measurement challenges logic. These are the fingerprints of the builders before time, architects of an era we were never meant to remember. Across continents, from the plateaus of Bolivia to the deserts of Egypt, from the jungles of Cambodia to the islands of Japan, the same paradox appears: structures carved with such precision that even our most advanced tools today would struggle to replicate them. And yet, they were made thousands of years before our civilization learned how to cast bronze or even record its own existence. At Pumapunku, in the Bolivian Andes, blocks of diorite, one of the hardest stones on Earth, are cut with laser-like precision. Perfect 90-degree angles, interlocking geometries. The seams between stones are so thin, so flawless, that not even a human hair can pass through them. Each block weighs dozens of tons, yet they fit together like pieces of a cosmic puzzle. In Egypt, the Great Pyramid of Giza aligns with true north to within a fraction of a degree, an accuracy modern engineers would need satellites to achieve. Its base is level within millimeters, its core stones shaped with a precision that suggests machinery, not mallets. And the deeper you go inside, the more impossible it becomes. Shafts angled perfectly towards specific stars, chambers proportioned with mathematical constants embedded in nature itself. P, F, and the speed of light. Who could have built such monuments? And how? The usual answers no longer hold. Copper chisels and wooden sleds can't explain the atomic precision of stonework that modern laser scanners struggle to replicate. The primitive labor narrative collapses under the weight of its own evidence. At Baalbek in Lebanon, a single block, known as the Stone of the Pregnant Woman, weighs over 1,200 tons. Even our largest cranes today can't move it. Yet there it lies, perfectly cut, positioned and aligned, as if placed by hands that understood gravity not as a force, but as a tool. And then there are the megaliths of Stonehenge, the underwater ruins of Yonaguni, and the forgotten complexes buried beneath the sands of Saqqara. Everywhere we look, fragments of the same signature appear: mathematical knowledge, astronomical alignment, and construction methods that defy their era. Not copies, not coincidences, patterns. Patterns that suggest these builders weren't just advanced, they were connected. Could it be that ancient civilizations shared a single source of knowledge, an inheritance from an earlier world that vanished? If so, then every monument is not just a tomb or temple, it's a message, a coded transmission across time. When viewed from above, the geometry becomes even stranger. Many ancient sites, Giza, Teotihuacan, Angkor Wat, are aligned along the same longitudinal bands, as if drawn across the planet by a single unseen hand. Some researchers have mapped these alignments into what they call the global grid, an invisible network connecting sacred sites across continents, each positioned at mathematically significant intervals. Coincidence? Or remnants of a planetary design, the blueprint of an age lost to memory? Imagine a civilization so ancient, so far beyond our current understanding, that the world it built became the foundation for all that followed. And imagine that after a global catastrophe, flood, fire, impact, or something even greater, their cities were buried, their machines turned to myth, their knowledge scattered among survivors who remembered them only as gods. The monuments we study today might not be relics of those who lived in darkness, but the last monuments of those who once lived in light. Their ruins whisper of technologies not made to worship the stars, but to speak to them. Across every ruin, the same truth emerges. Humanity did not build these things alone. We inherited them. And what we call the dawn of civilization may, in truth, be the twilight of another. Because when the stones remember what we have forgotten, the question is no longer who built them, but why they wanted us to forget. The hidden code of light. Every ancient monument seems to speak the same silent language, a language written not in words, but in light. At first glance, they are only temples, pyramids, and monoliths. But when the sun rises or the stars align, the stones awaken. Shadows fall in precise geometries. Beams of light pierce corridors built thousands of years apart on opposite sides of the world. And for a fleeting moment, the monuments speak. It happens at Machu Picchu, when dawn strikes the Temple of the Sun and illuminates a single carved window aligned perfectly with the solstice. It happens at Stonehenge, when the midsummer sunrise threads its golden ray through the heart of the circle. And it happens deep inside the Great Pyramid of Giza, where shafts point directly to specific stars, Orion's belt, Sirius, the northern pole, as if the builders were communicating not with Earth, but with the heavens. The ancients didn't just watch the sky, they built with it. Modern science tells us these alignments were coincidence or ritual. But the precision suggests something far greater, an understanding of celestial mechanics that would require centuries of observation, mathematics, and instruments far more advanced than the primitive tools attributed to them. In the temple of Abu Simbel, for example, the statues of Ra, Amun, and Pharaoh Ramses remain cloaked in darkness for most of the year. But twice annually, on the exact days marking the pharaoh's birth and coronation, the rising sun floods the chamber and ignites their faces with light. Not a degree off, not a minute late. To achieve that kind of alignment, you need perfect astronomical calculation, or a legacy of knowledge stretching back to a forgotten science. The same geometry is found across continents. In Mexico, Chichen Itza's Pyramid of Kukulkan was built so that on the equinox, shadows form the body of a serpent slithering down the stairs. In Cambodia, Angkor Wat mirrors the exact pattern of the Draco constellation as it appeared in the sky more than 10,000 years ago. And at Newgrange in Ireland, sunlight travels through a narrow tunnel only once a year, on the winter solstice, to illuminate the innermost chamber where the ancients placed their dead, as if awakening them from darkness. How did cultures separated by oceans and millennia all share the same obsession with light, the same ability to weave cosmic precision into stone? What were they trying to preserve or remember? Light is the oldest code in the universe. It carries information, reveals patterns, defines life itself, and these builders knew it, not just as a physical phenomenon, but as a sacred language, a form of communication between heaven and earth. Every alignment, every shaft, every equinox shadow is a mathematical sentence written in photons, and perhaps what they were saying wasn't religious at all, but scientific. Encoded within their temples are constants of nature, the same principles that govern time, energy, and space. It's as if the builders were leaving a message across ages. We understood the laws of light, we knew how to use them, and one day, so will you. But if they knew so much, why did they vanish? Why did that luminous wisdom fade into myth, leaving behind only the echoes of its brilliance carved into stone? Maybe it didn't vanish at all. Maybe it was hidden, transformed into symbols, carried through secret teachings, buried in mystery schools and ancient manuscripts. The Pythagoreans called it the music of the spheres. The Egyptians named it Ra's path. The Mayans called it the ladder to heaven. Different names, same code. And if we listen closely, not with the ear but with the eye, we begin to see the pattern forming again. The same numbers, the same ratios, the same luminous geometry echoing from temple to temple. The ancients were not worshipping the light. They were trying to remember it. A secret passed down through architecture, myth, and ritual, waiting for the moment when humanity would once again learn to read the sky. The hidden code of light was never lost. It was only waiting for us to look up. The Great Erasure. Every civilization tells a story of creation and of loss. But hidden within those stories lies a pattern too deliberate to ignore, a recurring silence that devours entire ages. It's as if someone keeps pressing reset on the memory of humankind. We call it progress, but what if it's amnesia? From the sands of Egypt to the jungles of Central America, layers of time reveal the same unsettling truth. Civilizations rise to brilliance, then vanish without a trace, their knowledge scattered, their achievements turned to myth. The records don't fade, they're erased. In the ruins of Alexandria, the greatest library of the ancient world, once held hundreds of thousands of scrolls, texts from Greece, Babylon, Persia, India, even Egypt's own forgotten dynasties. It was said that the library's shelves contained the totality of human wisdom, and then, in a single act of war and power, it was gone. The flames that consumed its halls did more than destroy paper. They erased the blueprint of a civilization that had begun to remember. Centuries later, the same silence would fall again in China's burning of the books, in the Spanish conquests that destroyed Mayan codices, in the quiet censorship of discoveries that didn't fit the story. Every time humanity began to look back too far, history folded in on itself. Archaeologists call it cultural collapse. But the precision of these collapses, their timing, their completeness, they feel less like natural decline and more like the surgical removal of memory. Why do our oldest records stop where they do? Why does written history begin only after 12,000 years of human existence? And why does every civilization seem to have inherited knowledge that no one remembers inventing? When you strip away the comfort of the accepted timeline, you begin to see the outline of something vast, an intelligence behind the erasure. Maybe not a single hand, but a system, an invisible mechanism of forgetting. The Maya believed time was cyclical, that ages rose and fell like breaths of a living universe. Each cycle ended not with destruction, but with purification, a cleansing of memory. In their calendars, the long count resets after cataclysm, as if the universe itself chooses to forget what came before. But perhaps it wasn't the universe that forgot. Perhaps it was us, or someone who wanted us to. There are whispers, even in modern times, of discoveries quietly buried again, unearthed artifacts lost in museums, classified photographs of ruins beneath Antarctic ice, and research censored under the banner of national security. It sounds like fiction until you realize how often truth hides behind bureaucracy. The deeper we dig, the less we're allowed to see. And when knowledge threatens the narrative wins. Think about it. In a world where ancient builders could align monuments to the stars, measure the Earth's curvature, and encode constants of physics in stone, why do we insist they were primitive? Because acknowledging what they knew means admitting what we've forgotten. Perhaps the Great Erasure wasn't a single event, but a cycle, a rhythm of remembering and forgetting that keeps humanity confined to the same small circle of understanding. A prison of time, built not with walls but with ignorance. What would happen if that cycle broke, if we suddenly remembered everything? The full history of who we were, what we built, what we destroyed. Maybe that's what the ancients feared most. Not the end of the world, but the return of memory, because to remember is to awaken. And once humanity awakens, the cycle ends. The keepers of the secret. When the great civilizations fell, not everything was lost. Some fragments of that forgotten light survived, hidden in symbols, encoded in rituals, whispered through generations that refused to let the flame die. They were not kings, nor priests, nor conquerors. They were the keepers, guardians of something older than history, older than religion, older than the story we tell ourselves about who we are. Through centuries of darkness, they worked in silence. They hid within temples and monasteries, cloaked their knowledge in allegory, and passed their truths through symbols that could outlast empires. While kingdoms rose and crumbled, while libraries burned and languages died, the message endured, carved not on fragile scrolls, but in the geometry of cathedrals, the proportions of art, the rhythm of music, and the pulse of sacred mathematics. From the mystery schools of Egypt to the Pythagoreans of Greece, from the Essene communities to the Hermetic orders of Alexandria, a single doctrine persisted, the belief that knowledge is sacred but dangerous, a double-edged flame that could enlighten or destroy. In the Middle Ages, as dogma replaced wonder and questioning became heresy, that doctrine went underground. Its guardians became masons, alchemists, astronomers, and artists, each preserving a piece of an older puzzle. Leonardo da Vinci painted it into his canvases. Isaac Newton sought it in his studies of sacred geometry and the hidden structure of light. Even the architects of the Gothic cathedrals, with their impossible arches and precise alignments, seemed to build not for worship but remembrance. Everywhere they appeared, one symbol followed them. The eye, watching, radiant, eternal. It wasn't the emblem of control, but of vision. A reminder that true sight doesn't come from looking outward, but inward, into the depths of what humanity once knew and has since forgotten. The secret they kept wasn't a treasure or a weapon. It was a pattern, a blueprint of how the universe organizes itself, how life resonates with energy, how knowledge mirrors creation. The ancients called it the harmony of the spheres. Modern science calls it frequency. To the keepers, the universe wasn't matter, it was vibration. And when a civilization loses harmony with that frequency, it falls into chaos, erasing itself, just as it has, again and again. They believed humanity had already fallen before, and that the only way to rebuild was to remember the code. Not to worship it, not to hide it, but to protect it until the world was ready. Some say fragments of that wisdom still exist today, hidden in secret archives beneath the Vatican, locked in Masonic vaults, encrypted in the rituals of ancient brotherhoods. Others believe it has simply changed form, concealed in plain sight within the equations of physics, the architecture of DNA, the resonance of music, and the dance of galaxies. Whatever the truth, one thing is certain: the keepers never stopped watching. Across millennia, their purpose remained the same: to safeguard the fragments of the old world, to ensure that when humanity's memory returned, there would still be something left to remember. Perhaps that's why their symbols appear everywhere, in temples, in manuscripts, on flags, in the very geometry of our cities, not as warnings, but as reminders. They knew that the greatest danger to humanity wasn't ignorance, it was forgetting. And so they waited, generation after generation, for the moment when the human mind would once again begin to ask the forbidden questions, when light would pierce the darkness and silence would no longer hold. Because once the secret was remembered, it could never be erased again, and the cycle of amnesia that has bound humanity for 12,000 years would finally begin to break. The evidence they tried to bury. Every great secret leaves behind traces, pieces too stubborn to erase, too heavy to hide, and over the past century, those traces have begun to surface, one after another, as if the earth itself were tired of keeping the secret. In 1909, a mysterious report appeared in the Arizona Gazette. It described a team of explorers who claimed to have found an underground city hidden deep within the Grand Canyon, filled with Egyptian-style artifacts, mummies, and hieroglyphs carved into stone. Within weeks, the story vanished. The site was sealed, the Smithsonian denied involvement, and the article was quietly buried in the archives. But what if it wasn't a hoax? What if it was one of the first cracks in the wall of silence? In the 1960s, miners in Oklahoma unearthed metallic spheres encased in sandstone over 300 million years old. In South Africa, identical spheres, perfectly balanced, machined with symmetrical grooves, were found in Precambrian rock dating back billions of years. Geologists called them natural formations, but they looked manufactured, objects that shouldn't exist, from times when nothing intelligent was supposed to exist at all. Then came the Antikythera mechanism, a corroded lump pulled from the depths of the Aegean Sea in 1901. For decades, it was ignored, dismissed as debris. Only later did scientists discover that it was, in fact, the world's first analog computer, a device capable of predicting lunar phases and eclipses with astonishing accuracy. It took humanity nearly 2,000 years to reinvent its complexity. If the Antikythera mechanism was an isolated marvel, we might call it coincidence. But it's not. Across the globe, similar impossibilities appear. From the precision-cut monoliths of Pumapunku to the vitrified walls of ancient fortresses in Scotland and Peru, melted as if by intense heat or unknown technology. In 2013, under the dense canopy of the Amazon, LiDAR imaging revealed the unthinkable: vast networks of ancient roads, canals, and pyramids buried beneath the jungle, stretching across hundreds of miles. An entire civilization, erased and forgotten, rediscovered only by accident. Its builders had mapped the land with mathematical precision, the same sacred geometry found in Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Mesoamerica. If these fragments were random, the story would end there. But they form a pattern too precise to ignore. We have cities older than our definition of civilization. We have artifacts that predate humanity's supposed technological evolution. We have alignments that defy coincidence. And we have myths that all say the same thing: that there was a world before this one, destroyed and buried beneath layers of time. So why does so much evidence vanish the moment it's found? Researchers lose funding, discoveries are reclassified, artifacts disappear into private collections, and when independent voices try to speak, they're silenced, dismissed as pseudo-science, or worse, erased entirely. But truth has a way of resurfacing. In recent years, satellite imaging has uncovered entire cities beneath the Sahara Desert, megalithic alignments under Antarctic ice, and submerged structures along ancient coastlines once above sea level. Science calls them anomalies. But the pattern is growing. The same coordinates, the same geometry, the same story repeating across the globe. Each discovery chips away at the wall built to contain our past. And when the wall finally breaks, the world we thought we knew will collapse with it, because buried beneath the dust and denial lies the one thing that cannot be suppressed forever: evidence, tangible, undeniable, and rising from the ground like a memory reborn. We are not rediscovering our history. We are remembering it, what humanity was never supposed to remember. For thousands of years, humanity has stared into the past, convinced that it was searching for its origins. But what if the truth we seek isn't behind us, it's beneath us, buried in the soil of forgotten ages, waiting to be remembered? All the evidence, all the myths, all the ruins and riddles point to the same conclusion. We are not the first civilization to rise upon this earth. We are the latest. Those who came before us knew things we are only beginning to rediscover. They understood the laws of light, sound, and geometry, not as abstract theories, but as living forces. They built temples that sang with the movement of the sun, monuments that spoke in alignment with the stars, and cities that resonated with the frequencies of the earth itself. They were not gods. They were human, like us. And like us, they reached too far. Some say their fall came through war, others through natural catastrophe, or perhaps something much more profound: a misuse of knowledge so powerful that the very balance of the planet was shaken. And when the dust settled, a new world began, built upon the bones of the old. The memory of that world became myth, and myth became history's shadow. But shadows don't vanish, they follow. They hide in our symbols, in our languages, in the instincts we can't explain. They whisper through our art, our architecture, our dreams, and every time we approach the truth, the past begins to awaken again, like something ancient stirring beneath the surface of our collective mind. What if this awakening is already happening? What if the reason we're drawn to the mysteries of lost civilizations is because deep within us, we remember them? Maybe the great secret isn't that something once existed before us, but that it still exists within us. Humanity's story may not be a line that begins and ends, but a circle, a memory reborn through every age, and like a circle, it cannot be broken, only forgotten. That is the dark secret. Not that the truth was taken from us, but that we surrendered it. We chose the comfort of ignorance over the responsibility of knowledge, and in doing so, We condemned ourselves to repeat the same cycle: discovery, pride, collapse, and amnesia. But every cycle eventually breaks. Every secret, no matter how deeply buried, eventually returns to light. The earth remembers, the stones remember, and now so do we. When we uncover ancient ruins beneath the desert, when we find cities under the jungle, when we decode the stars above, we're not learning something new, we're hearing our own echo. We are the continuation of a forgotten story, the next verse in an endless song that began long before history was written. And maybe this time, we don't have to forget again. If the past civilizations fell because they misused their knowledge, perhaps our purpose now is to understand it, not as power, but as balance, not as dominance, but as remembrance. Because what was once erased can still be written anew, in the choices we make, the truths we face, and the way we choose to see our place in the cosmos. The great secret of humanity was never hidden by others. It was hidden by time and by ourselves. But time, like truth, has limits. And as the walls of history continue to crumble, the voice of the old world grows louder, calling us to remember who we once were and who we are meant to become. Because in the end, what humanity was never supposed to remember is precisely what will set it free.